I'm a New Yorker. I was born in Jamaica, and my parents were both Jamaican immigrants. So raised in New York. I'm a hardcore New Yorker, so I love being a New Yorker. I really it's funny when I think about how I've been fortunate to be raised in a state like New York and also have Jamaican culture on top of that. I think that's really cool, and I count that a blessing. Um, I love sports. A big fan of football, New York Jets. I used to
Okay.
be a ball boy for them, and also a big fan of boxing.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
yeah, big boxing fan. It's a sport but my father was a big Ali fan, so I probably have to credit my father for that. Yeah, he loved Ali,
Uh-huh.
and we
Is he
watched coming up.
still considered the greatest fighter ever?
Oh yeah, by most fighters, yeah.
Okay.
I think Ali's considered great, not just because of what he did in the ring, but also his persona as well.
Yeah, it was
He's
huge.
a lot different from a lot of boxers nowadays. Um, but his persona, in terms of not just his charisma, but just how he used boxing as sort of a tool to be like the people's champion.
Okay.
So, but yeah, he's still considered by many to be the greatest.
That's cool. Okay, so I'm a big foodie, and
Okay.
I heard Jamaican. Okay, so do you know how to cook?
No, I don't. It's funny because I don't, not because I can't. I
Okay.
don't because I'm just don't have the patience. But I typically when I do cook something or get a recipe and cook something, it turns out good because I think cooking is just a creative gift. I believe.
Okay.
If you're good with creative, I've seen that, and I think creativity is probably my gifts. If you kind of merge it, just over if it was to pick a gift, probably creativity,
Okay.
and that's one of the reasons why I think I'm in the industry I'm working in.
That's good. That's good. I myself, I love to cook. I don't do a whole lot of it right now because we were talking, behind the scenes that my kids are becoming older, so they can cook for me.
Mm. Yeah, they can.
Like they can cook for me. So the series that Demetrius and I were doing is finding your purpose,
Mm.
and sometimes people don't find their purpose until later on in life. Other ones, believe it or not, they find it early. And some of the things that you were telling me is that you grew up in New York, then you moved out to LA, and then you went back to New York, and now you're here in the Atlanta area. And so my question to you is, did you begin to find that your purpose was changing as you moved to these different states, or were you finding your purpose?
Mm. Oh, well, it's funny when it comes to purpose. I think sometimes it's a journey to that.
Hmm.
I think that for me, I would say when I was about 25 is when I started to really 24, 25 when I started to really sort of um, start to imagine or have some sort of thoughts about purpose,
Hmm.
right? And I think that over time, I've been able to piece that, but with the help of God, just be able to piece that together, and all my experiences have led me to the point where I do have a clear understanding of what my purpose is.
That's good.
But I think you have to go through certain experiences. Even way back then, let me go back a little bit. Even way back then, sometimes you have what I call a glimpse of purpose, right?
Hmm.
Meaning that somehow deep inside, you know that you're tied to some sort of purpose, and you may even get a glimpse of what that might be. For example, if you happen to be a Christian, if you know anything about biblical narrative, right? They had Joseph, right?
Right.
In the Bible, there's a character named Joseph, and he used to have dreams.
Right.
When you start having dreams, the dreams weren't specifically that clear. They were just sort of vague, but ultimately, if you read the arc of his story, it came to pass, even though the whole revelation of what his purpose wasn't
Hmm.
clear. He just knew that he knew somehow from the dreams that he was going to be doing something leadership oriented. He leadership oriented to the place where even his family recognized it and
Right.
was somehow subjected to it.
Hmm.
But he didn't know clearly what it was. It took certain experiences in his life to sort of build that, and even that, then he didn't really see what it was until he was there.
Right.
And I think that for me, that's been my journey. I think when I look back, so sort of when I look at where I am now, what I'm working on doing, I look back and see even that I've always sort of had a drive and vision to be in business. I knew that. I
Right.
knew somehow it would be there. I'd be there somehow. I knew that about 24, 25. Even
Okay.
before I started acting professionally, I just, the journey has been not what I expected.
Right.
Like, the one more thing I will say is that going through the profession I've gone through, which is acting, film, television, stage, I believe this uniquely prepared me for the purpose of being a business owner, because you're dealing with risk as an actor, I think, more than most people deal with it, because after each project you're interviewing again for a job that you may get or you may not get for the next. You may not get another job for a year,
Right.
but you're knowing how. But it's basically what it's doing is it's strengthening your risk tolerance. And I think if you're going to be a business owner, particularly if you're going to start something from scratch, or even if you're going to acquire something, which I think I personally am an advocate for that, and actually that's one of the things I'm sort of exploring. So if anybody out there hears me and you have a business to sell that's cash flowing, reach out to the podcast, and it depends on what it is too.
Right. Absolutely.
Because I'd rebrand it with what I'm doing. But I think that.
But
Yeah,
why did you rebrand? See, I love to hear that. So you tried something and say, okay, it's time for a rebrand. So what was your process behind that?
Well, let me say this. I haven't rebranded yet. I'm saying that I would, if I acquired anything, it has to rebrand in sort of the framework of what the brand is I
Okay,
have, right?
gotcha.
So but let me just say this: as far as business acquisition, what I'm learning, and I think a lot of Black people should think more about this. In the research I've done, right now, this generation, especially the baby boomers, there's a lot of businesses getting sold. There's a lot of businesses out there that's cash flowing that people just want to get rid of. People are tired of. The heirs don't really want to do it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for wealth building there. And if you can find a business that's cash flowing, and you can acquire it, man, there's SBA loans, and I'm sure you know about
Right,
that stuff. All
absolutely.
the stuff out there you can do. Then I would, and then that becomes an asset you have. So if you can do that, that's I think a game changer, as opposed to starting from scratch. Because I think I don't know, at least 80-90% of startups fail. So,
it's a high percentage.
So anyway, I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, you did, and you even mentioned wealth, and so that's something that Demetrius and I we really, really talk about, is closing that gap, that wealth gap. Growing up in Detroit, it was living day by day, week by week, month by month, and you have to come out of that environment to really, really see like the big picture. And one of the things I would have to say that my dad did, he was a landlord, but he only knew like, okay, just get the rent. I know I have to make repairs, but he didn't know how to build. He didn't know how to build.
Scale
right,
it,
right. Scale it. Yes, that's the right term.
Yeah.
He didn't know how to scale it to really make it an empire that it could have been today, that he could have passed on to his children. Seeing that, he had 8 of us. So it's like, a bit of piece of to each of us. But that's important about who's in your circle. And so when we talk about like really like where are you getting advice from? So I know from my parents that if I'm talking about business advice, even though I love my parents to pieces, I wouldn't ask them because they don't have a successful business. I'm finding myself that when I have conversations with my dad, he's learning from me, which is fantastic. I'm really glad that he's open about that. And it's that legacy. It's starting to be both ways. It's going back to my dad, to my grandmother, and then it's like to my children. So for you, are you finding, or I don't know what your upbringing is, but with that legacy and with that wealth gap, are you finding that you have to reach back to bring everybody forward? Or, your parents pretty much had a really solid foundation for you?
Well, my parents are deceased, unfortunately, but I remember my father tried that. I believe my father really tried to do that. And the probably biggest problem my father had was he didn't really ask enough questions for from the right people, right? So because of that, he made a few mistakes. But I know from back in like late '70s, I remember him and my mom trying to rent out the upstairs. Then they got a knucklehead tenant who had a knucklehead kid who caused some problems. Then after causing problems and breaking things, sued my parents. You know, and so I'm like, so as far as they didn't really have the knowledge. Or maybe weren't asking the right people, and even my father tried the same with some land in Florida. We ended up having to sell. So my father, I definitely give him credit. He tried to build that to pass on,
That's good.
and ultimately, he had 5 kids, right? And 3 of them between me and my mother. But for my mother, there's 3 of us, and he had 2 other children before, by 2 different women. And I know all my brothers and sisters.
Okay.
But when it was time to sell things, no one was thinking really forward. So literally we pretty much had to sell things,
right?
Sell everything off. But at the end of the day, it's all good. I think, but they didn't really, going back to your question, they didn't really, I think, have the resources. Maybe now, I think, when you're asking sort of mental, as far as learning, right? Now I think there's every opportunity out here to learn. You got YouTube.
Yes.
And if you don't
YouTube University,
yeah, seriously, if you don't trust, you have podcasts, you got books. I'm a big advocate of reading. I read voraciously, on topics and finding out who the people are, who are the main thought leaders in those areas.
That's good.
So you just. I look at different people, but then you go through the research and sort of who these people are. For example, I'm probably going to promote these guys, and I'm not getting a penny from them. Like, I'll give you an example, like Bigger Pockets podcast. I'm a big fan of that podcast, and they're like a real estate ecosystem. Right?
Okay.
I like the guests they bring on, and then you hear great guests, and you say, oh, he's talking about this, and you go find that guest information, and you follow that guest. So there's there's really, in my opinion, no excuse for anybody to say that they can't do something. I don't care what it is. The resources are there from the internet, books, audio books or physical books or whatever. But I think the resources are there. It just comes down to you and myself, as a note to myself, making time to take advantage of it, to read, to take notes, to read it, read another book on it, compare different ideas.
That's good.
And I think ultimately come up with what your philosophy and framework is, what works for you, whether it's in investing, whether in real estate, whether in whatever it might be, And then I'm a big fan of thinking long term. I'm not into
that long term.
Yeah, I'm not into. Well, I definitely, in my mind, I already know. If somebody comes to me and tells me, "Okay, this it's going to return this or that," I kind of know sort of what's reasonable.
Yeah,
and,
right.
And if I hear some numbers or percentages that sound unreasonable, my first question is going to be like, depending on what they say, is, well, how do you plan on getting there? But for me, you kind of have to have your business or investment philosophy that you stick to, and that becomes like the compass that guides your decisions in business and all that stuff. But you kind of get there by learning, either by experience. Really, you can read all the books and all the stuff you want to. You get there by making some mistakes along the way.
What do you think about investing in a business coach?
I think that's cool if you need it, but like I'd say it's the same thing as any kind of resource you invest in, whether it's a book or whether it's a class or whatever it is. You just do your research on them. Do your research, see if it's a business coach, kind of have them draw out what they're giving you. And they may draw, we could do this, and you may look at 10 things they got and say, well, I don't need about 6 of these, but 4 I do. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, and always be willing to learn too, even if you may say, oh, I don't need 6 of these. Always kind of be open to maybe there's something you missed too. I'm always kind of open to learning, and then kind of too until I get to a point where I know what I know. And most times knowing what you know is going to come through experience.
That's good. So tell us a little about your acting experience, like a couple of films that you were in, and then also any that you produced, and then from there we're going to flip it again. How you took that and begin to create your business. So we're not going to say the business name now. It's in the works, which is super exciting. I find that just super exciting when you start a business. But yeah, tell us again what films that people would be like, oh yeah, okay.
Well, it was funny. I produced a student short. That's probably the only film I produced.
Okay.
For it was a Yale student short. But I plan on producing film. That's my long-term goal.
Oh, cool.
That's one of the reasons I'm focused on developing my business now, so I can get it up and running, sort of scale it to where I want it,
Yeah.
and then go off and produce films. So that's my ultimate goal, right? I was trying to do them simultaneously, and I said, nah, because the thing about producing films, you always have to not you always have to, you always going to rely on finances, right?
Right.
You have to go get those people. And it's a lot easier to get those people when you're positioned a certain sort of way, right? In my opinion, so I'm basically working on positioning myself in a sort of way where it's going to be easy for me to work with financiers, the way I would like to work.
Right.
So
I love that positioning to win. That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And so again, we know
Did
that.
I answer your question? I don't know if I answered.
Oh no. It's okay. I'm about to go back to it.
Yeah.
So so you're creating, and I always call it a small business when it's in the infancy stage. But sometimes some people come in to small business at $10 million as seed money. So your small business, what do you hope this small business creates for not only your avatar, your clientele, but also for your community?
All right. Well, how should I say it? I don't mind talking a little bit about the business.
Okay.
The brand's going to be called The Sexy Nerd.
Okay.
So I already have the domain. I'm already got things working on. And so the idea really is just, I call it a mission-driven lifestyle brand, right? So let me give you just a couple of definitions just for whoever's listening. I kind of define sexy as highly appealing, interesting, and attractive. That's sort of how I define that word for the brand. Nerd is someone who's single-minded. I'd even go so far to say purpose-driven, curious, somebody who's curious and who's innovative, right? So that's basically my definition of what it means to be a sexy nerd. They're appealing, interesting, attractive. And that doesn't necessarily mean physically attractive. We know beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
It's sort of like, at one point I said the brand is for the sapiosexual. Some people don't even know the term, which I guess a fairly new term, meaning you're attracted to how someone thinks, right? So the purpose-driven, curious or innovation side comes in as well. So then you have, for what we're going to do, not trying to do, what we're going to do is reimagine what it means to be a nerd, right?
I like that.
And so what we're going back to the idea about the community, what we are is building an identity or ecosystem behind a certain community that I don't think is really being, not even really, I know is not being served out here. And there are people like that all over the world. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
And this is a recent example. I remember I heard a clip from a podcast that I like called The Pivot. And I think, I've got the brothers' names. There's 3 brothers on there. I forgot the other brother's name, but there's 3 brothers on there. There's Ryan Clark, there's Fred Taylor, and the other brother in there, light-skinned dude. But the light-skinned guy, why am I forgetting his name? It's slipping me.
Look, cover your ears. He can't remember the name.
Yeah, I can't remember his name right now. It's slipping right now. But I remember one time they were talking about something, and Russell Wilson's name came up. And he called Russell, I think, corny or square, something like that.
Okay.
And I said to myself, that's interesting. I said, and he was comparing them with, I think he was talking about him, comparing them with, I think, in relation to maybe a future, I think he was saying. Somebody, don't quote me on that, but someone else. But I remember thinking to myself, okay, like, why would that be a bad thing?
Right.
I mean, from what we know of Russell, he's great at what he does.
Mm-hmm.
He's a family man. He he has a clear understanding of sort of his image and what the kind of image he wants to present, which
Yeah.
is a positive one.
Right, right.
You know, he he takes care of parent, his wife, his kids, so on and so forth. It says he's corny, according to your definition, right?
Right.
What's actually wrong with someone emulating a guy like, um, I don't know if that's the right term, but or mimicking a guy or a lifestyle or a approach to life,
Right.
like a Russell Wilson,
Right.
right? And so for me that put Russell in sort of the outlier space, because we live in a culture right now
The joy of
where even if
things,
it's
and
not said,
and I would have to say that my kids were like, "Mom, you always start off with the beginning of seeing the good in people." And I said, "Well, I have to. It's like, don't everybody deserve a chance?" And they're like, "Just cut to the chase." Did you not see what she did? I was like, "But it's a reason." And I'm not saying, I go in and somebody who embezzled something that I let them do my books. That's not showing any type of wisdom. But I like what you said about Russell Crowe and
Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson. Oh, I'm sorry.
Russell Crowe
Wilson.
could be that too. I don't know Russell. I mean, it could be anybody, but I just use Russell Wilson as that example.
Right. That is like, it's like, why is he doing it? It's like, well, why not?
No, why not? Yeah, and I think and so. I'm saying all that to say, like, Russell. People like Russell, would, in my opinion, would be. And I have a list of people would be a male sort of manifestation of what a sexy nerd is in the world,
That's
right?
good.
And I remember even like, one time a friend of mine produced and his wife produced a movie on Mahalia Jackson. I wish I could remember the name right now. Sorry, y'all, I would promote it. But Mahalia Jackson and Ledisi, Ledisi plays Mahalia Jackson.
Okay.
So I went to, I don't know, for some reason I went to social media, and she says on her social media, "I'm a sexy nerd and I belong to God." And that struck me. That made me right away know that I was on the right track. And Ledisi calls herself that.
Right.
So and then she presents her music is a certain type of music, right, that goes out there in the world. So for me, which leads to my last point about the brand, I pulled it up because I want to make sure I read it.
Okay.
The brand itself has underlying philosophy, right? And the philosophy is based on a verse called Philippians in the Bible, Philippians 4:8. It says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things." And so what underlies the brand is
That's good.
that philosophy. So I'm looking, so whatever I do, that's sort of my compass. I'm able to say, okay, it doesn't mean people, and I'm not saying that people have to be a Russell Wilson, for example. There's other people as I've been researching law, and I said, man, he's one. There's a young boxer coming up. He said something, I read an article, he said something, yeah, I'm really a nerd. And I said, that's it. This guy, I said, here's another one. Here's a boxer, who fits that brand for
That's
me.
good.
Someone who's great at what he does,
Yeah.
which is what I think a sexy nerd is. They're already successful.
Yeah.
They're people who are out there already accomplished, they're doing things. No matter, and they don't necessarily have to be celebrities. They're out there doing things. They're accomplished. But this is a brand for those people who there's an identity. They're not loud, but they're getting things done. Right?
I love it.
And to be quite honest, even when I think about the origin of sort of where I really saw the power of this is I think it's 2005. I think I went to a consumer electronics show. I got invited to it in Vegas when I was doing this movie at the time. They invited me. Toshiba invited me, and I went. And my line brother, my Sans, as we call him, we went together. I said, "Yo, Rick, I got an extra ticket." And he came with me, and I never forget. I think Bill Gates spoke that day. Was there that day. A few other people. I think it was Bill Gates. I forgot who we saw speaking, and it hit us. And I remember turning to him and saying, "Man, nerds really run the world." And he was
Yes,
like,
they
"Yeah,
do.
yeah, they do." So for me, it's like reimagining that and getting more black people to think that way. Young black men, young black women. All around the world, not just here in the United States, all around the world. And I think, and then not just black people either. When I have a conversation with, I had a conversation with my banker when I set up a bank account, And he was like, and he was asking me about the name. I said, yeah, what I'm explaining. He says, I'm a nerd. And he's from Brazil, right?
That's
and so
good.
for me, it's like, all right, so this is, in my opinion, a global mindset that a brand that's needed for a lot of people around the globe who need that kind of voice and who have that identity already, but want a voice for that identity.
I love that global mindset, and it's with my business coach. That's one thing that she talks about is global domination. It is time for us to come from out of the shadows and really bring forth what is needed for our clients, for our customers, for our community. So that's really, really huge. So how can people reach out? How can they, really follow you and see what you're up to?
Well, they will soon. Right now, the sexynerd.com, I'm developing something right now for that. So once that website's up, it's going to be a couple months, for that. Then they'll be able to sign up on the newsletter for that. But right now, you can follow me. Just follow me on Instagram, Evan the Conqueror, Evan the Conqueror. And then I also have a Instagram for the online store called on Instagram called the sexynerdbrand.com. So that hasn't opened yet either. So like I mentioned to Michelle, we're in the very early stages, but we are moving forward and building the infrastructure. But I think that for me, I'm very excited about it. I think that there has to be a reimagination of what it means to be a nerd. Many of the people who call people nerds or this, that, guess what? Most of your checks are being signed by nerds. It's just what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Most people who run the companies you work for are nerds.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely love that. So we appreciate you coming in today. Again, we know you're busy. We made that great connect among friends.
I appreciate you.